I'm a fine line, baby, baby. I'm a fine line, baby.
Fam, what is cracking? It is your girl, Lillian Francis. Welcome to part one of my two-part series on vocal processing. The first part is going to be all about serial processing, and the second part is going to be all about parallel processing. I am a pop vocalist, and so I have a lot of experience editing my own vocals as well as vocals that I mix for other people. And the techniques I'm going to be showing you today are kind of my approach that I've been developing over the last 8 or 9 years. So it's dialed in. Today we're going to be talking about serial processing. So we're going to look at my serial processing chain. So my compression, my EQ, my de-essing, saturation, etc., getting my vocals to sound really good and crisp and clear. And this is something that I do in a separate project, but then I pull it into my main project for all the parallel processing stuff. And this is going to be reverb and echo and other things that I don't necessarily want to serially process. I want to parallel process because I want them to come up around my vocal instead of bringing my vocal back when I turn up the dry wet knob. But I'm going to talk all about why I do that in the next video. For now, we are looking at the serial processing part of things. So without further ado, let us dive right in. Splash! All right, fam, welcome to my Proj. Now, this is my vocal processing project, okay? The main reason that I record and edit my vocals in a separate project is because by the time I get to actually recording my vocals in my project, the project is too big and it's hard to get the buffer size to where I like it, 128, without getting a lot of dropouts and things like that. So the first thing I want to do before any serial processing is getting everything to a relatively even volume. When we feed our vocals into a compressor, we want them to be as kind of balanced out already as possible because we want our compressor to work as little as possible, and that's how we're going to get the best results. So my approach is actually I will just kind of visually look at it for clues and see if anything looks particularly soft or particularly loud. But I can't rely solely on just visually it looks bigger or visually it looks smaller because it depends if I recorded it really close up or if I recorded it far back. I use my eyes to tip off which ones might be a little bit louder than the others, but you might have a loud one that when you turn it down sounds way too quiet, right? So this one I can visually see it's kind of chonky compared to
When it gets too hot.
that, right? But if I were to bring this all the way down so that it's in line visually with the rest of them,
Cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top.
right? It sounds way far away. So I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to turn it down by 1 decibel. But likewise, we also might want to turn up some of our quieter parts. So like right here,
When it gets too hot.
when it gets to, that's a little bit low, right? So I can take those and bring it up just a little bit, maybe 2 decibels or something. And then I will normally do like a little bit of a crossfade too, so that you can't tell that it's all of a sudden way louder and then all of a sudden way quieter.
Cool off when it gets too hot.
There we go. And maybe this one comes down a little bit. We'll do it like 1 decibel. There we go.
Cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top.
We're not trying to get rid of all the dynamics at all. We're just trying to smooth it out so we're getting a relatively consistent level going into our compressor. All right, let's go ahead and start talking about our vocal processing chain. We are ready to start serially processing these. All right, so the first thing I have in my vocal processing chain is my pitch correction, which I use Wave's real-time plugin for. Really anyone will do. I like this one because it's super easy to use and I've always used it. So the main kind of buttons and knobs that I use are the speed, note transition, and scale. So I'm going to set the scale first here, which tells the pitch correction what notes we want to snap my off notes to. This song is in D major, so I'm just going to select major and then D. Next, I want to set the speed at which we start correcting our notes. So speed here is essentially like your attack. So how fast we're going to pitch correct your initial, kind of the transient of your vocal, the initial word. And the note transition is once you've already started singing that word, if you're changing the note while you're singing, how fast it is going to keep up with that changing note. So if you want like super auto-tune, T-Pain sounding effect, bring the note transition and the speed all the way down.
Beneath paper, palm trees, apricots, and sunscreen.
So I typically have my speed around 40 and my note transition around 40. I typically keep them the same.
Beneath paper, palm trees, apricots, and sunscreen.
Now you also have this option here for correction. You can turn it down or up. It's essentially just a dry wet knob. I always keep it at 100 though, because I don't think it sounds too intense. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we are gonna put on a plugin for mouth noises. There are gross noises that come out when we're singing, and the point of these plugins is to remove them. My favorite one that I found so far is Spiff by OX Sound, and this just has a preset under vocals called Remove Mouth Clicks, and it does the freaking trick, y'all. So I'm pretty lazy about this, honestly. I just keep it on the default setting, Remove Mouth Clicks, and let me just show you what it does. So if I press play here, you're going to visually see here kind of the mouthy noises that it's bringing down.
Beneath paper, palm trees, apricots, and sunscreen.
Now to hear what that's actually doing, we can hit Delta, and this is going to let you hear what's being taken out. Oh my God, this is like literally the equivalent of popping is it. It is so satisfying to hear those come out of the track. Holy shit. All right, mouth clicks gone, goodbye. Next up on our vocal mixing chain, we have our first EQ. Here's the thing about EQ, y'all. There is no hard and fast rules about cut this frequency and boost 1K and cut, 8K, whatever. There's no that for anything that you put an EQ on, especially not vocals, because everybody has a different vocal tone. And I EQ my vocals differently than I EQ yonder fucks vocals and yonder fucks vocals, right? So my approach with using an EQ is always about emphasizing the frequencies that sound good in our sound and pulling out the frequencies that we don't think sound as good. So I think of these as like the frequencies that spark joy, emphasizing them, and then pulling out the frequencies that do not spark joy, taking them out. So we're gonna start out by cutting our low end. So what I typically do is I am just going to drag up my high pass filter until I start hearing the vocals thinning, and then I'm going to pull them back a bit. So let's do that.
Beneath paper, palm trees, apricots, and sunscreen. Cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top.
Right, I'm kind of hearing it thin right about there.
Beneath paper, palm trees, apricots, and sunscreen.
So typically between like 150 and 200 is where I'll end up cutting it. And this will be lower or higher depending on your vocalist. Next thing I want to go for is my muddy zone, which is between about 200 to 500. By cutting this zone, I'm going to get so much more clarity. So I'm going to create a new curve and I'm going to boost it up a little bit. I'm going to press Command and bring it down just to bring my Q in a little bit so I can hear kind of more specific frequencies. And then I'm going to hit this preview button. And when this preview button is engaged, when I press play, I'm only going to hear what's either being boost or cut. So I'm going to now search for the gnarliest mud I can find, okay? Where it sounds the grossest. So muffled there, right? So muddy. So that, let's bring it out. I'm just going to bring it down by about 3 decibels. All right, next what I would recommend doing is putting a little curve in, bringing down the Q and sweeping back and forth and see if there are any frequencies that sound particularly bad or particularly good. And then you can either boost them a little bit or cut them a little bit depending on if you want them or not. So that would look a little bit like this. If your vocalist is like a little bit nasally, that's going to be around like 1K, 900 to 1K. Right, so if that was an issue with your vocalist, then you could bring it down a little bit, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 decibels. I don't really think that's an issue here, so I'm going to disengage it. But yeah, if there's a kind of a problem frequency or you think that the vocal could just be enhanced a little bit by taking out something, pull it out. And likewise, if you think that you could benefit from increasing more of the frequencies in certain areas, then go ahead and do that. So there's a lot of like vocal clarity right around this it's like 2,000 to 5,000 range. So to open up the vocals a little bit, I could leave a little bit of a boost here.
Beneath paper, palm trees, apricots, and sunscreen. Cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top.
But again, I don't really think we need to open it up there, so I'm going to turn it off. This is really all I'm going to do here. One more thing you might see is adding a little bit of like vocal shine and breathiness by just creating a shelf here and just boosting some of those highs, which is all fine and dandy, but we're going to get to that vocal shine in a little bit, so I'm going to just keep this as it is, and this is my EQ curve for my vocal. And again, it's going to look different depending on the vocalist and maybe even depending on the song. Cool. All right, that is my EQ, my first EQ, and now we're going to go for a compressor. So the compressor that I use is the Waves CLA 2A, and this is one that's kind of specific specifically meant to sound really good with vocals. So it's really easy for me to just put it on and then increase the peak reduction until I'm getting about 2 to 3 decibels of gain reduction here.
Cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top.
So why 2 to 3 decibels? So 2 to 3 decibels is a pretty subtle compression, but I'm actually gonna be doing this twice. I'm gonna have another compressor a little bit later on, and I like using multiple compressors because compressors work better when they have to work less hard. So breaking that up between a couple different compressors just makes the compressor do better with the work that it is doing. Now, if you don't have CLA2A and you want CLA2A, I do have a link in my bio if you want to support my channel and buy it through that. You can totally do it. Otherwise, you can use Ableton's built-in compressor, which I also love. And now we do have to deal with ratio and attack and release, but that's not too hard either. Let's just quickly go through this. So I'm gonna keep my ratio at about 3 to 1, which means that for every 3 decibels of gain that want to go past my threshold, only 1 is going to be let through. So we're essentially reducing past the ratio. We are reducing that volume by a third. Anywhere between 2 to 1 and 4 to 1 is pretty good for vocals, so I'll keep it there. Now for attack, typically what I'll do with my first compressor is have it be a little bit faster than my second compressor. And this is just to kind of catch any very wily words that are popping out too much, to kind of really, bring them back and rein them in fast. So 2 millisecond attack right here is pretty good to go. And then for release, I may just do a little bit of a faster release at 70 milliseconds. And now let's just bring down our threshold until we're getting about 2 to 3 decibels of gain reduction.
Beneath paper palm trees, apricots and sunscreen. Cool off when it gets too hot.
Cool. That is good right there. And I'm going to add maybe just a decibel of output gain. So that's how we would use Ableton's compressor, but I like the sound of the CLA2A a bit more, so I'm going to delete this compressor. But now you see how you would do it if you were working with attack and release settings. Next thing I'm going to add on is a little bit of a vocal shine, so a high-end exciter. There are a couple good free plugins for this. One is, what's it called? Slate Digital, Fresh Air. We have mid-air and high air.
Beneath paper palm trees, apricots and sunscreen.
Too much of this can get annoying, so be frugal with it, but a little bit of shine really helps.
Apricots and sunscreen. Cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, the next thing we're gonna put on is some saturation. So I don't always use saturation. I think sometimes it sounds really good and sometimes it doesn't. I often just use Ableton Saturator. I like it, but if you have a fancier saturator, feel free to use that one as well. And just adding a little bit of drive is going to add in some higher end harmonics. Now, I'm less likely to use a saturator if I'm also using it in conjunction with a high end exciter, because I feel like the high end exciter kind of does the work that we want a saturator to do, but they are slightly different in the quality that they bring to the sound, right? The saturator isn't just really kind of high-end breathy stuff. We also have mid saturation and low saturation, etc. So I'm just going to add a little bit of drive, maybe 5 decibels, and then I'm just going to take 5 out here on the output. And let's see if we like it turned on.
Beneath paper.
Honestly, I'm gonna need my headphones for this one. Saturation, especially at this very low level, is challenging to hear. So I like to focus when I'm doing this.
Too hot. Lay low and you reach the top. But the clouds are coming and the winds stop blowing. One drop is out.
I'm not hearing a huge difference with this one, so I'm just going to delete it, right? If we don't need it, take it out. We don't need more processing that we don't need. So for now, I think Fresh Air is doing the job of kind of getting that presence forward, and we're not needing saturation as much. Goodbye, headphones. All right, next up, we are gonna do our second compression. So I'm just gonna copy over my CLA2A here. I'm duplicating it by holding down Option, dragging it over, and I'm just going to make sure that my peak reduction is at the right level.
Beneath paper palm trees, apricots and sunscreen.
That was basically good to go. I'm liking how that's sounding. Now combine both of these compressors, we're getting about 6 decibels of gain reduction, which is a nice, like, chill, not too much, not too little amount. So just a couple more things to round out our serial processing chain. I'm going to throw on another plugin by OX Sound, which is Soothe 2. So what Soothe does is essentially like a dynamic EQ that finds resonant and harsh frequencies and then pulls them down. So it smooths out your vocals and it gets rid of a lot of the yuck that you don't want. I used to do this manually with an EQ by scanning for resonant frequencies and then pulling down tiny little bits where I would hear those resonant frequencies. And you can do this. It's going to get rid of some of the resonant frequencies you don't want that are caused by like your room, or if you have a not great microphone, things like that. But Soothe does it all for you automatically. So check this out. If I'm just to press play here, you're going to see that we have a bunch of like dips coming down.
Trees, apricots, and sunscreen, cool off when it gets too hot.
And again, we have the delta button. So if I select this, you are going to hear what's being pulled out.
Trees, apricots, and sunscreen, cool off when it gets too hot.
Doesn't sound great, right? I feel good having that out. So I'm going to take off delta and then let's listen to it with and without the bypass.
Trees, apricots, and sunscreen, cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top. But the clouds are coming and the wind stop blowing.
It's subtle, but again, if you have this like on a group of vocals or like, you know, in the chorus where you have, I don't know, 5 to 10 vocals or something, it is going to make a world of difference. You can get pretty specific with this, with how you want it to react to your vocal. I'm just keeping it on the default right now, but just to show you kind of a little bit what we're looking at, this right here, this actually is not boosting this zone. This isn't like how you would normally see an EQ. What it's saying is that we are going to be reducing most in this range. This is the range where you're going to get kind of a lot of resonant frequencies, especially in vocals. So that's where we are keeping it for now. But if you're hearing like a lot of weird frequencies up here, right, you can pull it up here or bring it down there. Let's put on the delta so you can hear kind of the difference of what that would sound like.
Trees, apricots, and sunscreen, cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top.
Yeah, but right around here for vocals, anywhere from like 3,000 to 6,000 kind of is the sweet spot that I have found. And then you can increase the depth if you want the resonant frequencies to be pulled out even more.
Apricots, and sunscreen, cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top.
Obviously that sounds bad. We don't want it that high.
Apricots, and sunscreen, cool off when it gets too hot.
Cool. So at a depth of around like 2 to 3, you can maintain that clarity, but you're also taking out those nasty harshies. So love this one. Total game changer. And last thing we're going to throw on is a De-Esser, which is doing a very kind of similar thing to what Soothe is doing, but Soothe isn't particularly targeting my S's. It is reducing them, so I'm not going to have to de-ess as hard. And there are settings like I could use this as a De-Esser, but just for those of you guys who don't have Soothe, and for those of y'all who want to learn how to use a De-Esser, we're going to throw a De-Esser on this. So what is a De-Esser? A De-Esser is essentially a dynamic EQ that pulls out your s in your t, right? Sibilancy sounds. So when the frequencies of your s hit the threshold of the compressor, it dips just that area. So it's not affecting your entire voice, just the s. So I use Waves De-Esser. I love this one. Again, if you guys want to support my channel and purchase through the link, it's in the bio. So the first thing we're going to do is find out where that sibilance of mine is sitting in my frequency spectrum. So I am going to find a spot where I have a particularly intense sibilance.
But the clouds are coming.
So I could use this clouds
Coming.
right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate this by, I'm just going to select it, hit Command E to split my clip, and then I can delete both sides and then create a little bit of a loop. And now I just have the, now I got to find out where is that happening. Okay. So I'm going to throw on a Pro Q3. I'm getting like right around 10,000 and then go into my De-Esser here. Change the frequency to 10,000. Okay, so now when 10,000, that frequency range, when that pops over my threshold, then it starts getting reduced. And about 6 decibels is good for that.
Beneath paper, palm trees, apricots, and sunscreen, cool off when it gets too hot.
Perfect. So y'all, that is my vocal chain. So let's do the good old on off, and you're really gonna hear it.
Beneath paper, palm trees, apricots, and sunscreen, cool off when it gets too hot. Lay low and you reach the top. But the clouds are coming and the wind stop blowing.
World of difference, right? So much more clear, so much more upfront. Next, we're gonna bring these into my project and do some parallel processing. So I will catch you in the next video and let's finish off these vocals. Thanks guys for listening and learning with me. I hope this has been insightful. Let me know if you learned something new that you're stoked on down in the comments. I would love to know what's stoking you guys out. All right, see you next time. Bye.